The weight of silence. The sun had barely risen, casting soft golden light across the small town. In a cozy little house on Elm Street, Clara sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, the steam rising and swirling in the morning air. She stared at the window, her thoughts far away, her heart heavy. Clara had always been the quiet one in the family. She was the type to keep her feelings to herself, even when the weight of them grew unbearable. She would smile through the pain, nod through the discomfort, and push everything down because, well, that's what you did, right? You kept the peace. You didn't rock the boat. But today was different. Today, Clara knew she couldn't keep quiet any longer. Her older brother, Mark, was coming over for breakfast. It had been months since they'd spoken, ever since that one conversation that tore a rift between them. The argument had been so small, so meaningless on the surface, yet it had driven a wedge between them that neither had dared to address. Clara remembered that day clearly. It had started as a typical Sunday afternoon. She had been at their parents' house, the air thick with the usual chatter and laughter of family. But then, out of nowhere, Mark had said something that felt like a jab, a comment that Clara didn't know how to take. She had let it slide, but inside, the words stung. "Clara, why do you always have to be so sensitive?" It wasn't the words that hurt the most, but the way they made her feel so small, so invisible. She had responded with a nervous laugh, brushing it off, but deep down, something shifted. The old Clara, the one who would have spoken up, who would have let her brother know how much those words hurt, had stayed silent. And ever since then, their relationship had grown strained. Now, months later, Clara felt the weight of that silence. She could still hear her brother's voice in her head, still see the disappointed look on his face after that conversation. She had hoped the awkwardness would fade, that time would heal everything. But time hadn't done anything but build a wall between them. Mark knocked gently on the door, and Clara's heart skipped a beat. She opened it, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey, sis," Mark greeted, his smile warmer than she expected. "Hey," Clara replied softly, stepping aside to let him in. They sat at the kitchen table, the silence between them louder than anything they could say. Clara's hands shook slightly as she poured him a cup of coffee. She wanted to say something, to apologize, to explain, but the words tangled in her throat. The fear of making things worse held her back. Mark noticed the tension. "Clara, are you okay?" he asked, his brow furrowing with concern. "You seem distant." Clara swallowed hard. She couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. "Not anymore. I'm not okay," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I've been carrying this around for so long, Mark. I've been pretending, and I can't do it anymore." Mark looked at her, his expression softening. "What do you mean?" Clara took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "The way we left things, that argument we had, I should have said something. I should have told you how much it hurt when you called me sensitive. I should have told you that I wasn't just overreacting, that I felt like I was invisible in that moment. But instead, I stayed quiet, and I've been carrying that silence ever since." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she quickly wiped them away, feeling embarrassed. "I didn't want to make things worse. I didn't want to make you feel bad. But by not speaking up, I think I made it worse. I pushed you away, and now it feels like we're strangers." Mark sat back in his chair, his face softening. He looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing her words. "Clara, I had no idea," he said quietly. "I never meant to hurt you. I'm sorry. I guess I was just frustrated, and I took it out on you. I didn't realize how much it affected you. I should have listened." Clara nodded, her heart aching. "I should have said something sooner. I should have told you how much your words meant to me, whether they were intended to hurt or not." Mark reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I'm glad you're telling me now," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "We're family, Clara. I don't want us to be strangers. I want us to be able to talk about the hard stuff, even if it's uncomfortable. Especially if it's uncomfortable." Clara felt a weight lift off her shoulders, and for the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe again. The silence that had been suffocating her finally broke, and with it came a sense of peace. "I've learned something important," Clara said, her voice quiet but steady. "Sometimes, Keeping the peace isn't worth it if it means losing yourself in the process. If we don't speak the truth, if we don't share how we feel, then we risk losing the people we care about. Silence can be loud, and it can create distance that's hard to bridge. I've learned that it's better to speak the truth, even when it's hard, than to let silence poison everything. Mark nodded, squeezing her hand. I couldn't agree more. And I promise, we'll always talk things through, no matter how hard it gets. Clara smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. The truth had been hard to speak, but it had been worth it. Sometimes, speaking the truth is the hardest thing to do, but it's also the thing that brings us closer to the people who matter most. The weight of silence had almost been too much to bear, but in the end, it was the truth that set her free. And as they sat there, the warmth of the morning sun filling the room, Clara realized that no matter how difficult the truth may be, it was always better than living in the shadow of silence. Moral of the story. Silence may seem like a way to avoid conflict, but it often creates a deeper distance. Speaking the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, is the key to healing, understanding, and strengthening the bonds we share with others.